আজ একটি শুভ দিন। শুভ দিন স্বামী অভেদানন্দ মহারাজের আজকে শুভ জন্মতিথি। সেই উপলক্ষে কিছু তার বাণী ইংরেজিতে বাণী ও তার জীবন বৃত্তান্ত ইংরেজিতে পড়ে শোনাচ্ছেন আমাদের এই আশ্রমের ব্রহ্মচারী সায়ক মহারাজ।
According to the lunar calendar and the Bengali almanac, today is the auspicious occasion of the birth tithi of Swami Abhedanandaji Maharaj. So we will enumerate here a brief history of his life and his contributions to the Ramakrishna mission. The early life of Swami Abhedananda, he was one of those rare souls who gathered around the magnetic personality of Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar, and afterwards became instrumental in the fulfillment of his divine mission. The name by which the Swami was known before his taking orders was Kali Prasad. He was born on the 2nd of October 1866 in an enlightened family at Ahridola in Cap. His mother, Nayantara Devi, was intensely devoted to the goddess Kali, to whom she offered her whole-souled prayer for the birth of a gifted son. It was in response, as it were, to her ardent prayer that the child was born, and she named him Kali Prasad, to betoken the grace of the Divine Mother. Kali Prasad's father, Rasikalal Chandra, was a senior teacher of English in the Oriental Seminary of Calcutta. He was no less pious than his devoted wife. No wonder that a child who in after years shone as a bright luminary in the spiritual firmament of India should be born of such a worthy couple. His school life began at the age of 5, and he excelled all his schoolmates in studies, games, painting, and similar other pursuits. He often listened with rapt attention to the inspiring stories of the great Indian epics from the lips of his dear parents who, knowing the mental mecca of the boy, always tried to kindle in him an aspiration to emulate the lives of the great spiritual heroes of the land. From his very boyhood, he was inclined to Sanskrit studies. He made a special study of some of the most authoritative books on the subject and felt a strong desire to practice yoga. But without the proper guidance of a competent preceptor, the boy now began to search for a suitable teacher who would make him a real yogi and teach him how to attain the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, crowning glory of man. But for some reason or the other, he could not get a suitable opportunity to go to Dakshineshwar for a long time. At last, one day in the middle of 1884, he started at noon for the temple garden in the grilling heat of the sun. But great was his disappointment when he came to learn, after reaching the place, that Sri Ramakrishna had gone to Calcutta and would not return till after midnight. Sorely perplexed, he sat down with a heavy heart under the tree. After a while, a young man, Shashi by name, afterwards Swami Ramakrishna appeared there and asked him in loving accents the reason for his coming to Dakshineshwar. Kali opened his heart to him. Shashi, coming to know that Kali had not eaten anything at noon, at once made arrangements for his meal and midday siesta. Kali passed the whole afternoon in a breathless thrill of expectancy. The day rolled into night, but still the master did not come. The joy of the boy, however, knew no bounds. Then, at about 9 o'clock, Sri Ramakrishna came back to Dakshineshwar. The boy silently entered the master's room and made obeisances to him. Without any hesitation, he expressed his desire to learn yoga from him so that he might attain to the highest state of samadhi. At the very first sight, the master fathomed the depth of the boy's soul and was delighted to notice the vast spiritual possibilities latent in him. The mystic touch of the master brought about a wonderful revolution in his mind, and he immediately became buried in deep meditation. After that, Kali began to practice religious disciplines in right earnest under the loving guidance of the master, and through his grace was blessed with many spiritual experiences. He now began to avail himself of every opportunity to run away from the stifling atmosphere of his home and to sit at the feet of the master in the calm and elevating environs of the temple garden of Dakshineshwar. His thirsty soul drank deep at the perennial fount of heavenly wisdom which issued from the lips of the master for the spiritual comfort of eager aspirants. So to the service of the master, and after his passing, he renounced the world and became a sannyasin with the monastic name of Swami Abhedananda. His call to the forest. At the Maranagar monastery, where one by one the young disciples of the master gathered together and banded themselves into a holy fraternity of monks under the leadership of Narendranath, Kali used very often to shut himself in his own room for intense spiritual practices, as also for a systematic study of Vedanta and Western philosophy. This rigorous course of spiritual discipline and his deep devotion to the study of Vedanta received the admiration of all and earned for him the significant epithets of Kali Tapasvi, the aesthetic Kali, and Kali Vedanti. During the time he composed beautiful Sanskrit hymns on Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother. The latter was deeply impressed when she heard the excellent hymn composed about her own self, and she blessed him heartily, saying, "May the goddess of learning ever dwell in your throat." Indeed, this blessing of the Holy Mother came to be fulfilled both in letter and in spirit. But very soon, the call of the forest, a tendency to embrace a wandering life according to the orthodox traditions of monastic life, was most irresistibly felt by Swami Abhedananda, and he traveled barefoot from place to place, depending entirely on whatever chance would bring to him. He endured all sorts of privation and hardships and practiced austerities of all contemplation and of the Absolute. He visited sacred places like Kedarnath and Badrinarayan, Hardwar and Puri. The new Swami was taken by surprise, as he had not been previously consulted on the matter. His name was flashed in handbills and newspapers even without his knowledge. He was sorely perplexed and became extremely nervous, inasmuch as he had not before this stood on any public platform to deliver a speech either in English or in any Indian language. It was indeed a fiery ordeal for him. He strongly remonstrated with Swamiji for this step, which he thought was unwise. But all his arguments were of no avail. Swamiji heartened him with the inspiring words, "Depend on him who has ever given me strength and courage in all the trades of my life." These words comforted him, and relying entirely on the infinite grace of the Master, he appeared at the meeting on the appointed day. The hall was packed to suffocation, and all eyes were fixed upon the radiant countenance of the heroic soul who stood to discharge his responsibility at the crucial hour. The maiden speech which Swami Abhedananda delivered before the society was a splendid success. At this, Swamiji's joy knew no bounds. Referring to this happy occasion, Mr. Eric Hammond, an English disciple of Swami Vivekananda, writes, "The master," means Swami Vivekananda, "was more than content to have effaced himself in order that his brother's opportunity would be the fittest person to carry on with success the work which has been started in London." So he entrusted him with the charge of his classes in Vedanta and Raja Yoga and left for India in December 1896. Swami Abhedananda continued his classes and delivered public lectures in the churches and religious and philosophical societies in London and its suburbs for 1 year. During his stay in London, he formed acquaintance with many distinguished savants, including Professor Max Muller and Professor Paul Gaussen. His eloquence, his lucid exposition of the Vedanta philosophy, and, above all, his depth of spiritual realization made a profound impression on all who came in touch with him and listened to his illuminating lectures. It reflects much credit on his many-sided genius that even within this short period, he succeeded in creating in the minds of the Western people a deep impression. Swami Abhedananda at New York. In 1897, a new chapter was opened in his eventful life. At the request of the American friends and with the approval of Swamiji, Swami Abhedananda became greatly impressed by his intellectual brilliance. On one occasion in 1898, Professor William James held a discussion with him in his house on the problem of the unity of ultimate reality. It lasted for nearly 4 hours, and Professor Royce, Professor Landon, Professor Shaler, and Dr. James, the chairman of the Cambridge Philosophical Conferences, took part. Professor James was finally forced to admit that from the Swami standpoint it was impossible to deny the ultimate unity, but declared that he still could not believe it. In most of his lectures, he called upon everything is unknown and unknowable. Here, Vedanta comes to the rescue and advises its students to study not merely nature, but ourself or Atman, which is beyond nature, beyond name and form, beyond multiplicity. All confusion will be removed when the absolute truth, as taught in Vedanta, will be realized. The Swami's learned exposition of Vedanta in the light of modern scientific knowledge carried in it such an irresistible force of appeal that he was able to enlist such adherents as would not be conceived unless shown that Huxley, Tyndall, Spencer, or Kant agreed in substance with a particular view advanced by Vedanta. He traveled extensively all throughout the United States, Alaska, and Mexico, and delivered addresses on various phases of Vedanta philosophy in almost deep into the hearts of the nation. Except for a short visit to India in 1906, he thus spent almost a quarter of a century in this laudable work of spreading the message of the Master in prominent centers of alien culture. He was not only a powerful speaker, but also a prolific writer. If his spoken words molded the lives of hundreds of persons, his printed thoughts influenced a wider circle of people in different countries. His writings contain deep philosophy with a great wealth of information couched in a very popular style. As such, they have been of immense help in broadcasting the philosophical and spiritual ideas of India. As a matter of fact, they constitute a valuable legacy to the spiritually inclined souls all over the world. The Swamis returned to India. Swami Abhedananda, after a long and successful work in America, returned to India in 1921. On his way home, he visited Japan, China, the Philippines, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and Rangoon, and spread the message of the Master in those places also. The Swami was now 57 years old. Even at this advanced age, his spirit of adventure was distinguished men of the metropolis soon gathered around him and helped him in spreading the Master's message far and wide. A Bengali monthly under the name of Vishwavani was soon published to facilitate his missionary activities. In fact, his soul knew no rest, and he spent the last drop of his energy for the spiritual benefit of those who came in touch with him. But this unusual strain on his nerves at this age began to tell seriously upon his health. His iron constitution broke down almost beyond cure under the pressure of work. But his weakness and ailments notwithstanding, the Swami did not lack his wonted fire and enthusiasm when he was called upon to preside over the Parliament of Religions held at the Town Hall, Calcutta, on the occasion of the birth centenary of Sri Ramakrishna in 1937. He rose equal to the occasion, and he never forgot to emphasize in the course of his learned address the synthetic message of the Master, the mission of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, and the Swami was shown by his living example how a truly spiritual man, being dead to the world of senses, can live on the plane of God consciousness. For the first time, it was demonstrated that all religions were like so many paths leading to the same goal, that the realization of the same Almighty being is the highest ideal of Christianity, Mohammedanism, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, as well as all other religions of the world. Sri Ramakrishna's mission was to proclaim the eternal truth that God is one, but has many aspects, and that the same one God is worshipped by different nations under various names and forms, that He is personal, impersonal, and beyond both, that He is with name and form, and yet nameless and formless. In conclusion, Swami Abhedananda observed, "I hope that this Parliament of Religion will sound the death knell of all communal strife and struggle, and will create a great opportunity for prompting fellowship among various faiths." This was indeed his last public utterance, and bears eloquent testimony to his deep-seated loyalty to the Master, as also to the sterling stuff he was made of. The Swami left his mortal frame on 8th of September 1939 and passed into the realm of eternal bliss to enjoy a well-earned rest. The passing of such an outstanding personality from the arena of Indian life was mourned by a large number of people in India and abroad. He was one of the remarkable spiritual and cultural ambassadors of India to the outside world. He was indeed a life in which we find a happy blending of profound spirituality and a spirit of service. A life dedicated to the spiritual uplift of humanity. He came to the world and with the spirit of service, a life dedicated to the spiritual uplift of humanity. He came to the world in obedience to the divine will, to fulfill the mission of the Master, and after his task had been finished, he went back to the source of light and life from which he came. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukampam Jitavigram Shasataram Varmishamityam Tadram Krishna Shirasam.
जय राम